So from time to time, you'll find that there are bits of your lawn that might get worn away. Very often that can happen within the lawn, particularly in areas where you're walking up and down a lot, or where you're scuffing, or dare I say it, where you've mown it a little bit too close and scalped the lawn and ended up with a patch as a result of that. You can also find patches on the edges of lawns where you've got a flower bed and a lawn, and you can get patches of that, and we'll look at that in a little while. But first of all, the easiest patches to rectify really are the ones that are in the lawn itself. And you can either use a spade or a half moon edging iron to dig around the area, take out a square, and then dig up a turf from another part of the garden where you might have an excess of grass, or go and buy a small section of turf from a local garden centre or DIY store to do a patch repair. From one big turf you can do lots of patches out of one big turf, so you don't need loads of turf to repair little holes like this. So I've just lifted this little piece from another part of the garden. All I need to do is lay this on the surface, cut around it with my spade, my flat spade, or my half moon edging iron, lift that damaged area out of the way, and then pop the new turf in place. But a far easier way to repair a patch in a lawn, particularly in the spring, is to just fork through the area and then sow it with a bit of seed, and that will come up in as little as 2 to 3 weeks, and you'll find that that will grow in about 6 to 8 weeks, just in time for summer. It'll be completely covered over and you'll never even know it was there. So armed with my fork, I'm just going to fork through this little area and then get it ready to sow a little bit more grass seed in. So it's really a matter of forking through the area just lightly, and you'll find that once the grass has worn off a particular part of the soil, it really compacts a lot more easily. So that just that surface is what really needs relieving, the compaction. Lower down, it should still be quite open and aerated. So we'll just go through there and use the tines of the fork, just the ends of the tines, just to prick through. And you can see that's quite sticky, that surface on the top, where it's just become compacted because there's nothing to cushion the compaction as you walk across the ground. So it's going straight onto the soil and smearing and making the soil very hard on the top. It's causing what's called a pan, a hard surface. So just breaking that up a little bit is all that's necessary. It doesn't need to be a really fine tilth. That's fine. Any big lumps, just break them up, and that should be ready for us to sow into. And you could sow directly into that soil and it should germinate. But I like to do a special thing, which is to add a little bit of extra organic matter so that that grass germinates really, really quickly. So let's look at that quick little recipe. So we've prepared a little bit of soil and we've got a reasonable tilth. You can break up any really big lumps with your fingers. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix in some garden compost. So this could be bagged compost or it could be compost from your compost heap. And this is really nice stuff because it's nice and fibrous. I've pre-wet it, so there's a little bit of water in there as well. And that's nice and wet, which means that there's a water reservoir for the seed to start to germinate in. Whereas this soil, by comparison, is probably, although it looks wet, it's probably much drier than this compost is. So this compost is a really good friable mix, and I'm going to put a little bit of grass seed into there. Now you don't need much. Most people overdo it with the grass seed, so I'm just going to put a small amount in. So it's probably like half a handful, less than half a handful really, that I'm putting into there, and I'm just going to sprinkle it into that much compost. There's quite a lot of compost in there, and I'm just going to sprinkle that amount of grass seed into that bucket, perhaps a little tiny pinch more. There's a little bit blew out, and make sure you close the box so that it doesn't blow all over the place. And then I'm just going to mix that grass seed, stir that grass seed into that compost. And you can barely see it, to be honest, by the time you've mixed it around. But that little reservoir of compost will act as a really nice moisture sump for that grass seed. And you say, well, there isn't enough grass seed in there surely to germinate, but there is, and it will germinate so quickly. And so what we do is we just sprinkle that onto the surface of our patch. You can barely see the grass seed in it, to be honest. There's so little in there, but that's exactly the amount you need. And then you just stir that into the soil, just so that the compost is mixing into the soil as well a bit. And then just lightly firm that surface with the back of your hand. Don't ram it down hard. And it looks a bit mucky and messy, but that will soon germinate, that grass seed. Cover the area, patch fixed. Now when it comes to the edge of a lawn, you've got a little bit more of a problem, because you've got one side where there's soil and the other side where there's grass. So you can't really pack in with loose soil and then sow some grass seed in there, because it just doesn't work. So the easiest thing to do really is to take this section of turf from here and either replace it with some new, or a piece that you might have from another part of the garden, or really, which I think is quite a clever little trick, neat little trick, is to cut around on 3 sides of this damaged section and then completely invert the piece round, so that the fresh cut edge is on the outside and the little hole that's left here will end up being here. And then we can fork through the soil and repair it in the same way that we did the hole that's actually in the grass. So let's start. We just need to cut using either a flat bladed spade or a half moon edging iron. Just cut down through there, cut quite deep because we don't want it to stick as it comes up. Use the blade vertically as well and cut in a straight line. If you have trouble cutting in a straight line, then use a piece of board to cut along, because that will help keep it nice and straight. Cut all the way along and then cut back to the edge of the lawn here like this, and then use the blade of a spade, a flat spade, to lever that turf up a little bit and then slice in underneath. So we're slicing in underneath that turf so that we get it nice and even. If you don't get down nice and low, you'll find you'll end up with a really big, thick, chunky turf that's really heavy and really difficult to get bedded in. So we can just slice underneath that all the way through, get low and use your knee to push against your arm. And there's our turf lifted. So we can just pick it up and then turn it round. Goes back in there. There's our straight edge all the way along there. We can just do a little bit of forking underneath there to get it nice and level. And then all that remains to do is fork this little bit here, fill it up with a bit more soil, put a little bit of my grass seed and compost mixture in there, and that will grow and fill in that patch. And in the meantime, we've got a really nice straight edge of fresh turf down this side. So there we are, edges sorted, patches sorted. Those are the great fixes for anybody's lawn ready for the summer.